the most important subject in the world today, dominating all international news broadcasts all over the world. All eyes are on Tahrir Square in Cairo, in Egypt, where millions of people have just achieved a victory for mass popular power, poder popular. The people of Egypt have triumphed and bent events to their will. Of course, it's a complicated story, and I shall try to disentangle some of those knots for you. It's not black and white. Revolution is a process, not an event. It's not something that happens on one day and whose results you can instantly judge, even in this age of media 24/7. But one thing has been demonstrated this day and yesterday and over the last 10 days in Egypt, and it is this: the people united can never be defeated. And when the people move in their millions, they can topple anybody, any government, any king, any tyrant, any president. And that is a lesson that will be learned around the world. The truth is this, that the President Muhammad Morsi of Egypt was elected, yes, as president of his country, a signal achievement, no doubt. But he was elected on the crest of a revolutionary wave, and he betrayed that revolution, and that wave has now swept him away. And those waters are still raging. He himself has conceded in the last few days that he made, and I quote him, many, many mistakes. I would add a few manys to that. Many, 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 many mistakes he made. And I'm going to go through, as I have to, some of those. But I nonetheless think that a significant lesson has been dealt out by the Egyptian masses over the last 48 hours, and it is this: that the people cannot be ignored, that they are a factor in politics, domestic and international, as long as they themselves recognize that they are so and are prepared to act. More than 30 years ago, the Iranian people confronted the most brutal giant tyrant, the Shah of Persia, who had the most fearsome torture apparatus, who had an army, legions of hundreds of thousands of soldiers armed to the teeth. But when the Iranian people moved in their millions, nothing could stop them. And the tyrant Shah of Persia was brought down, and the Islamic Revolution in Iran began and continues still. And that subject too I shall have to refer to in the course of this talk on the second of my attempts to demonstrate, illustrate to the people of Australia what is going on in the Arab and Muslim world today. Morsi, as the presidential candidate of the Muslim Brotherhood, deserves respect, because the Muslim Brotherhood suffered greatly over many decades of dictatorial rule in the era of Hosni Mubarak. Their leaders suffered long terms of imprisonment, torture, disappearance and murder, long exile. The Muslim Brotherhood is an important, significant, indispensable part of the polity of Egypt. But they cannot rule alone. And that's the first of the lessons that I believe have been delivered by events in Cairo today. In periods of transition, in revolutions, it's not enough to win an election by 51% to 49% and then pretend to yourself that you have the right to govern and rule exactly as only you see fit. And we warned President Morsi over and over again over this last year that he had to embrace other political forces in Egypt if the revolution was to thrive and if his presidency was to survive. But he ignored all of these entreaties. And I hope that on their reflection, as they must now begin to be doing, this political trend of the Muslim Brotherhood will understand that political Islam is an important strand of political thought in the Arab countries, but it is not the only one, and it cannot rule alone. And any attempt to do so will lead to the events that occurred in Cairo these last 2 days. Secondly, a movement like the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which suffered so much at the hands of a dictatorship backed by the European settler colonial state of Israel and the United States of America itself, ought to have known that when freed from the jailhouse and entering the president's house, the idea that he could govern hand in hand with the same colonial state of Israel and the imperial superpower of America was doomed, because the interests of the mass of the Egyptian people are diametrically opposite to the interests of Israel and the United States of America. And so to attempt to rebuild Egypt on IMF and World Bank money and prescriptions was doomed. The attempt to continue to semi-blockade the Gaza Strip and keep the Palestinian people incarcerated in the most densely populated piece of earth on the land, just to please Israel and just to continue with the Camp David agreements, was doomed. If the Muslim Brotherhood means anything, it must mean brotherhood with the Palestinian people under siege in Gaza. Surely, surely. And the attempt, more than an attempt, of the many mistakes that Morsi made, his declarations against Syria, itself the victim of a conspiracy launched by the very same Israel and the United States and its allies. His eviction of the Syrian ambassador from Cairo, his decisive role in the expulsion of Syria from the League of Arab States, and above all, his call for Takfiri fanatic extremists in Egypt to go to Syria and join the attempt to rip Syria to shreds and pieces, doomed his government from the moment that he made those remarks. Who knew, Mr. Morsi, as I must now address you, who knew that when you demanded the downfall of President Bashar al-Assad, that it would be you who would downfall long before any change of government in Syria? But of course, the events in Egypt are not black and white. There are many forces at play of whom we should beware and of whom we should be careful what we wish for. I have to tell you that when I see Muhammad al-Baradei and remember the role that he played when he could have stopped the imperialist invasion of Iraq, but decided to please his bosses in the United States instead, when I see him on the platform with the generals today, it makes my blood run cold. I don't recognize him as speaking for the masses in Egypt, nor any of the fulul, the remnants of the Mubarak dictatorship who are dancing with delight today. And I'm